Hello and welcome to Season 9, Episode 98 of the Cartridge Club's Game of the Month podcast, where we bring together members of the Cartridge Club community to discuss the Game of the Month. If you guys are listening and you're new to the club, or you want to participate in future months like Spyro the Dragon or Final Fantasy VII, head on over to the community Discord, or follow us on Twitter at Cartridge Club NA. We love seeing the hashtag Cartridge Club whenever you guys talk about one of our games of the month. I'm Dean Lasagna from Round 2 Gaming, and on behalf of our rotating pool of hosts, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. And on behalf of the entire Cartridge Club community, I want to give a huge shout out to those who are part of the Patreon Club Backer tier. Joel Boyce, Kevin from Buried on Mars, Bass
Awesome,
Guy.
dude.
Yeah, he is. And Caleb J. Ross, thank you guys so much for continuing to support the show. It's October. It's the spookiest month of the year, and we decided to play Diablo 2. So joining me to talk about the game are two members of the Cartridge Club community who played along this month. We got Kevin, Buried on Mars.
Hey now.
And Church, the Game Grinder.
Hello.
Thank you guys both for joining me. Now, I want to ask you guys, because, I mean, this game, Diablo 2, has been around for quite a bit, right? It came out in 2000. It followed the hugely acclaimed Diablo 1. It's gone down in history as one of the definitive ARPGs, maybe even PC experiences. And here we are, 20 years later, we're just getting a remaster with Diablo 2 Resurrected. We're still talking about it. Kevin, what's your history with the game? Where were you the first time you played it? And how did you play it this time around?
So the first time I played it was probably maybe like 2002 or something. It was one of those games that I kept hearing so much about, even though I had a garbage PC at the time. One of the great things about Diablo 2 is that it was only 2D sprites, so it could play on pretty much anything. So I actually had a what I like to call a preservation copy of the game that someone threw my way at work. And I don't know if any of you know about preservation copies back in the day, but they would actually take those games and to make it easier for people to download, they would actually strip away all the cutscenes in that. So you would just get just the gameplay. So there was a few games that I played like that, like Metal Gear Solid on the PC and Diablo 2. You couldn't put it, you couldn't play it online or anything like that because you needed some sort of connection or something. I can't remember exactly, but I just played through, the main campaign. I remember I was playing as a sorceress. That's pretty much my go-to character, and I played through the game and I was done with it. And then I never thought of it again until I think it was like 2000. It was like right when the Xbox was coming out, and a couple of my friends and I were getting into playing games online, and that was the first time I started playing games online. And we were thinking of other people who that we could get to play online. And I mentioned one of our friends, and they were like, "Nah, he wouldn't be interested. He's still playing Diablo 2." I'm like, "What? That old game, Diablo 2? Who'd still be playing that in 2007?" Here we are in 2001. Or 2021, sorry, and still playing Diablo 2. So that was my first time playing it, and then I didn't really play it. I played it again about 5 years ago with Sarah. We played my wife Sarah. We played through on co-op, and that was a lot of fun. That was her first time playing it. This time around, I did buy the Resurrected edition, which I have some issues with, which I'm pretty sure we'll get into. But yeah, PC. I've tried playing the game with a controller once, and that was enough for me. It's just one of those things that I'm geared towards the keyboard and mouse, so I've only played the game on PC.
Yeah, and I really want to get into that because I played it on console, and there's a lot of mechanics that I'm wondering how it's handled on the PC versus with the Joy-Con controllers. But Church, I mean, you're an expert when it comes to the Diablo franchise. I think you mentioned in the community Discord that you've put I think you said thousands of hours into this. So, I mean, what does that trajectory look like for you since 2000? Have you been playing it ever since? Did you go dark for like a couple years and not see the sun? Like, how did you fit 1,000 hours into this?
Yeah. So, so I was fortunate enough to be able to play Diablo 1, like when Diablo 1 came out. Played it on PC, played it on PS1, and I actually didn't have my own PC in the late 90s up until right about 99, 2000, somewhere in there. I just become friends with a guy who I'm still friends with today, actually. And I went over to his place to hang out, and he's like, "Hey, have you ever heard of Diablo?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, Diablo 2 just came out." And basically, I dropped everything, managed to get the game, and yeah, pretty much for probably in the next 2.5 years, like I spent an incredible amount of time playing Diablo 2. Um, Initially, playing through the game, getting through all the difficulties, leveling up a bunch of characters, and I was still like so high on the game. I was like, how do I extend this experience? And for some reason, I thought it would be fun to try to collect like all the set and unique items in the game. Unfortunately, one of the things they changed with Resurrected is you can't have multiple accounts now, where you just have your one account, where back in the day, you could have multiple accounts. And I ended up having 8 different accounts. I believe they had 6 characters. It might have been 8 characters that were just all mules. And mules are basically they just hold items. And, of course, there's the item struggles in Diablo 2, so that made it a challenge and required so many accounts to do so. But that's really what drug out my playtime with the game, was just because I was still having fun just doing the grind. Diablo is very, a lot of dopamine rewards there with their loot system. And yeah, probably about 2.5 years. I remember approximately around the time when I stopped playing, and I never really went back at all. Just because I felt like I'd put my time in with Diablo 2. Not that I would never revisit it, but I just didn't have a motivating factor to do that. And, I had friends that have played on and off throughout the years. Like one of my best friends, actually, he played until like, I want to say like late, 2009, 2010, he was still playing. But I think a lot of people who really stuck with the game with Diablo 2, for so many years, eventually ended up just doing like a lot of botting. They'd use bots to gear grind to try to get like the absolute best stuff in the game. Because, I mean, like I said, I possibly put in a couple thousand hours. I don't, that's a rough estimate, just compared to like some of my other gaming experiences with time tracking. And in all that time, like I never got like the top tier stuff myself. Like I estimated about 80% of all set and unique items in the game, and really it was all the top tier stuff that I was missing. But I had everything else. I had checklists and everything.
I believe it. Yeah, 8 accounts, 6 characters per account. I mean, that's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
So you guys are clearly more experienced with this game than I am. My friend had it back in junior high. I used to go to his house during just lunch period. He was walking distance from the school, and I started up a barbarian and sort of waffled between single and multiplayer. And I remember getting as far as Bloodraven. So having replayed it now, that's still the beginning of the game. I never really quite made it that far. So I picked up Resurrected, which is a remaster of the full game with the expansion, and I got real hooked. I can totally see how you can sink hundreds and thousands of hours into this. Now I had 2 playthroughs. I played through the first time as a barbarian, which was fun. But I think the real fun for me was when I started up my second playthrough as the necromancer, and that's definitely how I would recommend starting a game if you're new to Diablo 2. But I mean, Church, help me out here. So there's 7 classes, but beyond that, they've added a skill tree to Diablo 2, which allows you to have multiple builds or different styles within those classes. So, what class did you play as? And can you give me and some of the listeners some insight into these cool kid terms like Jabazon and Skelemancer? Like, what are the popular builds out there?
Yeah. So, that's one of the things with Diablo 2 is you would make a character and kind of pick your route. I believe, I can't remember exactly if it was later on when they added the ability to respec. But I don't remember that really being a feature, because that's why back in the day when we wanted to try a different build, we had to make a different character. But yeah, so my go-to in these games tends to be more of a ranged class. So I went with originally, I think originally when I played the game, I probably did Barbarian at first, but then not too long after shifted into Amazon or Sorceress. This time I started out with Amazon. I go Boazon, and basically all the naming for each like build is generally like the focus with, you know, as a prefix, and then the, you know, less so with Barbarians because you got Whirlwind Barb, Frenzy Barb, but like Amazon, yeah, if you're using a bow, it's a Boazon, Javelin, or Javelin, Javazon. It just, you know, it shortens the naming, so you don't have to say multiple words because that's too challenging for some people, I think. But yeah, so that's kind of I think one of the hooks is to try different character or different build, you know, that it's kind of boosting your replay there.
Yeah, I gotta say it was a completely different game. Like when I went through with my barbarian class, I had 0 skills by the end of the game. Like not one, not even bash. Like I was all my skill points went into resistances and mace mastery, and so I had one button which was click, like just attack, and I would just sort of absorb the damage. And again, it was fun, but being able to summon armies of skeletons and golems and monsters around you and have like literally 20 NPCs fighting on your side, it's a whole different experience of a game. So, Kevin, how about you? I mean, you played Sorcerer for the first Diablo. You said that's sort of your go-to. Did you play Sorceress this time around?
Well, I wanted to do something different because I got to say, like, I am not on Church's level. I might not even be on your level, Dean. I am a very, I guess, I'll just come out and say, like, Diablo 2 is probably my favorite RPG of all time. And even though I have played through it, you know, about 3 or 4 times, I think I'm still very much a casual player. I go in and I really don't know what the heck I'm doing. I just, you know, find, you know, collect things and put it on my character and play through it. And the sorcerer has always been my go-to character. I just like burning everything with fire. I just go through and, you know, throw fireballs at everything. You know, whatever it is coming my way, just throw a fireball at it. And so, you know, this time around, I did want to do something different. So I picked the assassin because I've done that in other games and I've always had fun with that. So I was playing it. It's like a completely different game. Because with the sorcerers, you kind of go, when you go into a dungeon or whatever, you kind of go into a doorway and just blast everything with fire, and then, you know, wait for the scraps to come out and you know, blast them away. And but with the assassin, I had to like hide around corners and stuff and wait for people to come out and come around, and because she didn't have very much of a ranged attack, right? It was all close combat. So I was enjoying that. But I don't know how much you want to get into the online and offline characters and that. Did you want to get into that now, or did you want to wait?
Yeah, just hop
So
in.
what I wanted to do was have it so I could play it on my PC down here on my nice 4K monitor, but also bring the character over to my laptop so I can play it on my laptop while I'm hanging out with Sarah. So I created this character as an online character, and I got through to Act 2. And I was, you know, still having fun. And then all of a sudden, it was like the game just started crapping out, started cutting out. I'd start playing, and then it would just like, oh no, and then I'd want to start a game. I'd sit down and like, okay, I'm ready to play now. No, you're in line. You're at number 179 to get online. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I get that this is, you know, a launch of a new PC title. And they always have issues, especially when it comes to online servers and all that. But this is Activision. Or sorry, this is Blizzard. They've been in the game for 20 years. They're owned by Activision, who has tons and tons of resources, tons of money. It's unexcusable. I'm sorry. I know it's expected, but really, when they're asking $60 for a game, like all that stuff should be working. It should be working. If you tell me I'm able to put this character online and play on different PCs, it should be working. I don't care if like, oh, this is the norm and every game is like that and blah blah blah. Asking $60 for a game, it should be working. It's not a free to play game. This isn't a new studio. These are the big guys. the game should be working. So I got really pissed off at it, and I stopped playing it for a little while. Dean said, "Why don't you go back and do an offline character?" So that's what I did. So I went back to my go-to sorceress, and I'm only on Act 3 because there's only so much time in the day. I don't know how you guys get through multiple playthroughs.
No, totally. And I was running into a couple hiccups as well with my barbarian, and my necromancer was an offline character. So just really quick with the sorceress, do you find that she's sort of a slow build, like she gets more powerful toward the end of the game, or does it get more difficult toward the end of the game with the spellcasting?
I've never had any problem with her.
Okay.
I just like everything is like a ranged attack with her. Like I stick to everything. I put everything in the fireball thing.
Yeah.
I know in the first game, the I can't remember, is it a wizard class or something?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the
sorcerer.
Well, he was very squishy. Like anyone ran up to me and I was toast, right? But with her, like nothing seems to be able to get too close to her. And if they do, I also do that where you can go into the town and you can get a guy to come around and help you. And they seem to attack that guy first, which is really nice. They go after him, and I can just kind of hang back. And so he's kind of, what do they call it? The
Hireling.
Right, no, but a tank character. He's a little bit of a tank character where they go and attack him first, and then I do I throw the fire from, and it's kind of sketchy. I wish they kind of improved that a little bit, like because he can get lost sometimes, especially when you're in close quarters and that he'll get hung up on a wall or something like that. Yeah. It's kind of cool because he's his power is that he can heal, so I don't really have to worry too much about potions and that. When he does it, sometimes he'll like just not like I'll have like 16 health left, and he's like, "Hey, come on, buddy! Like, give me the health." And I kind of have to like use a town portal to go back into town and then come back into the thing, and that kind of like resets him a little bit, and he'll get into it, which is a little disappointing, but I don't know. It worked for the most part, so it's not I don't find the sorceress as squishy as in the first game, just because people can't get close to me.
Yeah, Sork definitely is one of the, I think, better classes. Like there's Diablo 2 is and this I might be jumping ahead when it comes to some of the difficulty discussion, but Diablo 2 it's kind of an interesting game because you have the different difficulty levels, and I think primarily playing through normal, like you're gonna be able to be pretty successful no matter what you do. You don't have to know the meta of some of these builds, but if you continue and jump through the other difficulties, like that's when like your choices can really have a huge factor in what's viable in the later difficulties. But I'll kind of save some of that for the later discussion.
Sure. So while we're on classes, we reached out to the Cartridge Club community to see what classes they were playing as, and far and away, Necromancer was the most popular response. There was a lot of Necro players, some Barbarian, some Sorcerer, some Amazon. I didn't see any love for the Druid or the Assassin, and those were the two classes that were added as part of the Lord of Destruction expansion. Have you guys? Oh, Kevin, I know you've played Assassin.
Yep.
Which is more sort of traps based. Church, have you played Druid?
Yeah. Originally, when Lord of Destruction came out, I played the additional classes. I pretty much had every class like up in the late 80s, early 90s or so. This time, I didn't play a Druid. I started out with my Amazon, and then I made a Sork, and then I started an Assassin, just because like as I was playing through the game and I was having other friends playing, I progressed further just because I actually took a bunch of time off. Like every Diablo release, I take like a half a week off of work because usually they get released on like Wednesday or Thursday or something. So I'll take days off, and like that's all I do. So I'll get quite a bit further than my friends. So then I'll make my second and third characters or whatever, so I can play with them, because usually it's play with whoever's furthest behind. You play with them just so you can get them caught up. That's kind of how me and my friends work that.
Right. Yeah, I dove pretty deep this month into a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. Watched a lot of interviews, read a lot of books, and it's just super impressive. irrespective of how it panned out, like how much work Blizzard North put into trying to balance the character classes, not only, act to act, but also, like you said, Church, difficulty to difficulty and skill path to skill path. Like they really wanted to make sure that at any point in those games, you could take a snapshot of two classes and they would be relatively equal in terms of, the different ways you can get through the game. So I think, 5 classes in general, but adding 2 to the expansion, so 7 classes and all the different permutations of builds. I think it's a tall order across the 3 difficulties. So it was pretty cool to see. But speaking of behind the scenes, I want to talk about one of the biggest changes to Diablo 2 from the first one, and that's the story. Right? In Diablo 1, the story, very much an afterthought. The cinematics, the big twist at the end, that was all done by, a separate party outsourcing work to a different team. This time around, they really wanted to be, or really want to have the story as sort of a strong driver. So it's a continuation off the first game, right? At the end of the game, the canon story is that the warrior defeats Diablo. He takes the fractured soul stone and he shoves it in his head to contain the power of Diablo, but it doesn't go as planned. He eventually becomes possessed. He becomes this dark wanderer, and he starts his journey east to awaken his brothers, who are the other prime evils, Baal and Mephisto. And the story, it's sort of told through the eyes of this old man who accompanied the dark wanderer and sort of inadvertently was the catalyst to a lot of these things actually happening, Diablo reawakening and Baal and Mephisto. And so you as the player or as a hero, you essentially follow the Dark Wanderer east throughout Sanctuary and essentially stop evil. You travel east, you stop evil. It's a simple story, but the way it's told, I think, is pretty elegant, and there's a lot of cool characters between the prime evils and the lesser evils. So, Kevin, what were your thoughts on the story this time around? Did you even pay attention? Had you paid attention in the past? No, I didn't think so.
I'm always lost. I never know what the heck is going on. I kind of follow it. Like I got there was the old guy and he's following, and you're chasing down Ball guy, Baal, whatever his name is. I stories just like, I don't know what it is with video games, but like I watch movies, I can follow a story. When it comes to video games, like it's just too much. There's too much action in between, right? It's like what happened? I watched like the opening cinematic like 2 weeks ago, and now I'm at the second cinematic. I'm like, what happened? I don't know. What do I got to do? I got to go get that guy. Just go get that guy. All right, let me go get him. So no, I have no idea what's going on. So I'm here to learn. I do find it interesting though that the big story twist in Torchlight 1 and 2. So spoiler alerts for those is that in Torchlight 1 at the end the canon is that the wizard guy or sorcerer or whatever, he becomes the guy that defeats the guy at the end, and then he becomes the guy you're chasing in Torchlight 2, and everyone was making like such a big deal about that. But here, it's in Diablo. Like they're just kind of doing the Diablo thing. That's kind of interesting. So that's all I gotta say about the story.
Yeah, I think they did a good job because you can simplify it in your head as much as possible. Like you're chasing a guy east and you got to go kill him. Like that's essentially the story.
Yeah.
But if you want the lore and you want to read about Adria the witch and her, her sort of coaxing the warrior post Diablo into becoming this sort of possessed thing, so that he could reawaken the primevals and all this stuff. Like you can get as deep as you want, but. I guess, Church, do you have a favorite part of the story? Do you enjoy the story and the lore behind it?
Yeah, I do enjoy the story. I don't necessarily have like a favorite part. Diablo it's interesting. It's one of those games where, like, yeah, you can entirely enjoy Diablo 2 without reading a single line of dialogue. They make it so easy just to click away and keep going. But if you want to sit there and kind of listen to the characters talk, you can really get all that backstory, the background, as you mentioned, to really flesh out the world. Now, do I remember all of that, even spending as much time in the game as I have? I don't. I know I know the main gist of the story. Like some of the finer details are lost on me. Like my memory's not great by any means, so some of those finer details I do miss, But I think the story is pretty cool. One thing that I really like about Diablo 2 story is how it pretty much continues right off Diablo 1. And it's not like you're actively participating in what's happened, because everything already happened. As the Dark Wanderer moves east, you're just kind of following in the wake of destruction, and the corruption that happens as he's passed through these areas, and you're trying to find the next steps to continue on to get to where you need to go so you can defeat the primevals. It's pretty awesome, and how they tied everything from Diablo 1, like what happened with the warrior, what happened with the Amazon or the rogue. I mean, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I will say, like, what the game does really well is add atmosphere to the like when you start Act 3 and you come into that jungle town. I can't remember the name of it. But when you start in there, and like everyone in the town, like the guy who sails the ship, you take a ship there, and he's from that town, and he hasn't been there for a while. And he's like, "Oh my god, my town is like ruined. Like, what's going on here?" And then you're going around and you're talking to the other people, and they're like, "Yeah, this place used to be great. We can keep it like safe along the shore here, but if you go past in the jungle, there's gonna be a bunch of monsters in there, so you know what you're going up for." So I think it does a great job of building atmosphere. Just the main finer points of the story is just kind of lost on me all the time, but that's my thing. It's not, I don't think it's anything wrong with the game. Like you said, like it's really my fault, because every time, like, I got stuff that needs to be identified, so I come into the main hub, and I go to Kane so he can identify everything for me for free, and he's got that thing over his head, and I'm like, oh man, if I click on him, he's gonna start talking again. And I click on him, he's got like paragraphs of words, and I'm just like, okay, let's go. I need to identify this stuff.
Yeah,
stay a while and listen.
And it's worth mentioning too. Like, if you play Diablo 2 online, which I'm of the camp where Diablo 2, all the Diablo games are intended to be co-op games. So I don't know. It pains me when I hear people play offline and whatnot, but to each their own. But when you're playing Diablo 2 online, what can make it really challenging is especially if you're playing with just random people in the public. When you beat a quest and you go talk to the next person, you'll be sitting there, reading the story, and they all ran off. They're all in the next dungeon, and now you're missing potential loot, because you have to be there when loot drops, because it's unlike future games, like that loot drops, like that's up for grabs. Whoever clicks on that first gets it. So the longer you're sitting in town learning about the story, is you're missing out on the loot.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that. You mentioned quests though, and having put as many hours as you have into Diablo, what are your thoughts on the way they've sort of integrated the quests into the story, where it's not randomized anymore like Diablo 1 was? It's the same set of 6 quests per act. Was that a good move?
I think it's fine. It helps with a game like this where it's kind of very repetitive. Having things mixed up could be great, but I think for what Diablo 2 is, it works just fine, because then you can kind of know the beats, know what you got to do, and then especially when you're running other characters or power leveling or any of that sort of stuff, you kind of can streamline your own process in some ways. I never had any problems repeating the quests. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that is a nice segue into the gameplay, which is really the bread and butter of the Diablo franchise, right? That kill reward concept that they've really mastered is what everybody loves. So I think they took some complaints that they heard about Diablo 1, like the constant clicking, and they've introduced some quality of life improvements like the click and hold and some of the inventory management stuff. And at the time, it was pretty masterful. Kevin, you mentioned it's probably your favorite ARPG, but how do you feel it holds up by today's standards, with all the other ARPGs we've got, that's have sort of built off of this. Is the loot rewarding enough? Is the gameplay diverse enough to keep new players invested?
There's definitely what do they call it? Quality of life improvements that they've made in other games that's been derived from Diablo and Diablo 2. Like, but it's transferred. Like I was mentioning before, like the AI from your partner, like that wouldn't be acceptable in a modern game today, right? Like it would get raked over the coals in a review or something like that. There's also a bunch of other things. Like I love that pet thing in Torchlight, where you don't have to keep going back to the town to start to manage all the inventory. You can just put all your garbage to your pet and send off your pet, and that just like keeps the gameplay moving. Better loot, or not loot, but inventory management systems and that are in other games. It's kind of like as I was playing this game, I was kind of torn, because it's like, do you want all those quality of life improvements in Diablo 2, or do you want to keep it pure? Do you want to keep that experience pure so people coming new to the game can enjoy it as it was? Because pretty much this remastered edition, or whatever, what's it called? The remastered? Which one is this one?
This is Resurrected, which is the remastered. There's
some R word that they put, So pretty much for this game, other than there was something that they did a little better. I can't remember what it is now, but it's pretty much the core experience with just better graphics, which is nice to see. But I kind of wish like maybe they would give you some options to turn on some modern things, just a couple of improvements that would have made the quality of life a little better. So I was kind of torn, because it's great, awesome. People coming to it are getting the core experience. But then on the other hand, like so many other games have done things better, and that just kept the game moving. That I don't know. I'm torn.
Yeah, and they really struggled with that. If you look at some of the behind the scenes, like what to change, because they knew that there are so many purists out there.
Yeah.
So even things like just the auto pickup of gold that they've added.
That's
that's something
one
that is a no-brainer for me.
I thought that was great.
But there's the option to turn it off, whether or not you want to keep it on or turn it off, right? The muling that was happening, they've added all these shared stashes now to so you don't have to mule your characters. But even that has its downsides, as Church, as you mentioned, right? You used to have X amount of accounts with all these mules, so you could collect everything. So I guess you're a little biased because you've put so many hours into it, and I'm sure it holds up for you. But what are your thoughts on Resurrected, and did it make sort of the right moves for the modern gamer, aside from the graphical overhaul? Like, did it add enough quality of life improvements?
I mean, for me, Resurrected is like, it's like the chef's kiss. It's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. What they did, it's the game, just fresh coat of paint, and what they did to expand on some of the design, like some of just little details that most people like could care less about. Like I remember watching one of the dev diaries where they were like, oh yeah, in this random building, like we added garlic and hanging meats and stuff. Most people couldn't tell you what any of that was, but the just putting those little details just fleshed out the visual element so much more. Now it was interesting because I played with some friends who hadn't played Diablo 2 before, so this was the first time. And I thought it was really interesting especially at first, a lot of them kind of struggled a little bit. Diablo 2 was a little bit more methodical, a little bit slower paced, until you get going with like things that might increase move speed, or you get a bunch of abilities. But once they gave it a little bit more time, like pretty much all their complaints went away. I think really the only complaint that I ever hear anybody says was inventory size. And I don't know why they made the choice to keep inventory so small. I can kind of agree with that. That was kind of my, again, with the whole muling thing, is I kind of wanted to start as items were dropping, uniques and sets, of like, oh, I want to start collecting these again because it's fun. If anybody wants to say, oh, I'd like this, I want to do this build, I'm looking for this item, I'm like, oh, here, I have it. Now taking away the ability to have all these accounts, like I can make a bunch of characters, but the shared stash, you get, was it 4 pages? And I had 3 pages, and I had those filled up like pretty quick. And I'm just keeping like again, like sets, uniques, like gems and the runes, like the things that are useful for everybody. So that was kind of a bummer. But I think just because this game is what it is, and they were like, we're going to keep the experience true, we're not changing anything, like I felt pretty good with that. And at the same time, like I haven't really played a lot of other ARPGs just because for some reason the Diablo series for me is like, I just can't get past, like everybody else is just trying to be an imitator. So I struggle to get into other ARPGs, which is unfortunate because there's some other really high quality ones out there. But I feel like getting invested in the Diablo series, and this kind of kicked in with Diablo 2, is like, I want to know these games are going to like live on, continue on. And with something like, Path of Exile, that could be, it's just that's its experience. Like, I don't know, it's this weird thing of me. It's just because I love the Diablo series so much. And like Kevin said, like Diablo 2, I struggle with naming like my favorite game, like of all time. It's impossible. I will never be able to say this is my favorite game ever, but I have a bunch of favorite games of all time, and Diablo 2 is one of them. Like I could say it's my favorite game ever, and I wouldn't feel like I'm letting all my other favorite games down, but I just can't make that call because there are other ones that are like, that's my favorite game. I just love Diablo 2. Like they can almost, I think as far as a remaster, I think they nailed it for the most part. Besides, they're trying to give you the true experience of Diablo 2. They didn't want to change anything. There's kind of a joke that a lot of people are making is that, they're giving you the true experience, so you have to deal with the connection issues. You have to deal with the server issues that they had because they didn't change anything. They just gave you this game and they slapped a new coat of paint on it. Like, yeah.
No, that's good, and I would echo that. I mean, I think if you're a newcomer to the game or want to experience it, Resurrected is the way to go. And there's a way for you to hop back into Legacy mode and see the original graphics. There's a way for you to toggle off a lot of these quality of life improvements. So even if you want to see what the original experience was like and make your own choices from there on how you actually enjoy playing the game, I think that's the way to go.
Now I got a question for Church. Just a quick question. Yeah. So the people who were playing Diablo 2 for the first time, were they coming from Diablo 3 and going back to 2?
Yeah.
Okay. I could totally see that.
And most of my new friends to it, like they gave it an honest go and eventually ended up like enjoying the game quite a bit. I did have one friend that I was really surprised about that. He's like, I just can't get into it. It's too slow. It's too hard. Which, I think it's valid. Diablo 2 was cut from a different cloth, where it's like they don't give you tons of instructions on like how rune words work or how these builds work, and then especially like once you get into the later difficulties, like if you made your build in a certain way, like you're gonna hit a brick wall where it's just, if you're playing a barbarian, unfortunately, like it gets a point when unless you have the gear to support that barbarian on like hell difficulty, like you're pretty much screwed because you don't have high resistances for all the elements, and there's no way to get that with your stats and skills. So, and I know that friend in particular struggled with that sort of stuff, where a lot of games now, they tell you the systems inside and out when you play the games, or there'll be tutorial menus or tooltip explanations.
Right.
Yeah, I think that lack of hand-holding was actually pretty pretty nice. So like we had a lot of newcomers to the game that were in the Discord just getting tips from everybody else, and that's what was helping propel them forward. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Like, what do all these builds mean? And I tried to respec my barbarian at level 37 to a whirlwind barb, and that sucked because now my barbarian's bricked. Like he can't do anything because I don't have the right equipment or anything. So yeah, it's sort of fun to hear from people who have played the game, some recommendations and things on how to speed things up.
Yeah, I wish they would have given you a little more flexibility with that to try different things too. Like I think you can only reset your stats once, right? For every
per difficulty, yeah.
Yeah. You got that reset, like it's the woman in that first town that'll do it for you. So I wish that they would let you, like, even if it just costs you gold or something like that, some sort of penalty, just to try out different things with your character instead of having to restart with a new character.
Sure.
And that was kind of interesting too, because like Diablo 3, like that was one of the big things with Diablo 3 is they wanted people to be able to experiment and mess around with builds. So instead of having skill trees, they just gave you skills and you could switch them up.
Right.
And there was actually like a lot of criticisms about that. A lot of people are like, oh, they dumbed this down, they babied everything up for all these new gamers who can't handle the struggles. And
come on. I always find that ridiculous for, like, if you don't want to do that and you want to play, you can play it that way, right? You can play, just don't do those things that they put in there for other people. Like, you don't want to play on easy mode, don't play on easy mode.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having easy mode there.
Well, speaking of weird people, the resurrected version and even the original have the auto map feature. And there was a poll put out to see what type of auto map players prefer. And you can have it in the top left, the top right, or you can have it sort of overlaid across the whole screen. 4% of people said they don't use a map at all.
Oh, wow.
Which is ridiculous.
Crazy.
I'm guessing they're still in the rogue encampment somewhere. 13% said they use it in the top left corner, which I think is equally weird. 36% said top right corner, which is generally how I played through the first little bit. And then once I figured out you could put the overlay, that's where I went. And that's where 47% of the people voted for. So full screen overlay, you could change the opacity. So how sort of transparent, translucent it is. Where did you guys prefer to keep your maps?
Oh, right over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it off to the side, like off the, and it alters, like I can switch it,
Yep.
between different, I map it to a button where I can just click on it and switch it depending on which direction I'm going or whatever. But I can't imagine playing it without a map, because the map is like, that's part of the thing, is like you want to clear the whole map and discover all the corners and everything, Any ARPG that doesn't have that, I generally don't finish it. I'm like, that's like part of the pull, that's part of the thing that attracts me to those games. It's just finding all the corners of the map and clearing out all the enemies, get rid of them all, because you want to keep your character leveled up too, right?
Yep.
So
yep. Okay. Well, before we get off of gameplay, I did want to talk about some of the difficulties and some of the features that were left out of the original game. Of course, David Brevik and his team at Blizzard North really wanted permadeath to be a feature of this. They wanted to be able to dock you experience points on every death, irrespective of difficulty. And they are sort of implemented in some way with hardcore mode. And, there is an opportunity to play like that. But I found the game, and I'm on Act 3 or Act 4 now of Hell difficulty. So there's normal, nightmare, Hell. As you beat each predecessor, the next one unlocks for that character. And I'm finding it super hard. But it's super rewarding to finally get to those higher levels and find this crazy loot that would have been impossible in the normal mode. So I would almost recommend any players who are looking to play through the game, go beyond normal, continue with Nightmare and Hell. Would you guys agree with that? Like, did you guys play on Hell mode or Nightmare mode?
Like I said, I'm super casual with this game. So I usually, when I finish a normal run, I'm pretty much done with the game. I do mean to go back like at something like on a second playthrough and play through it on hard, but I always end up losing my character or something like that. Like the last time I played through it with Sarah, we played it co-op online, and when I fired up the game this time, my character was gone. I imported some characters. This was the cool thing with Resurrected, is I could import characters on the old Diablo 2 and bring them into this. But all my, you know what it was, is because we used mods. I'm just thinking of it now. We did use some mods on the original Diablo 2 when we played through it a couple of years ago, just to like, you know, make it in 16:9, and I think that was it. It was just like some graphical things, because the original game only played in 800x600. I think that was the highest you could go.
Yeah.
And so Sarah was playing on a TV. You know, she was on the couch playing on a TV. She couldn't see it, so we modded it so she could play it on a modern TV, and up the fonts and that too, right? Make them a little bigger so she could read them. But unfortunately, that wasn't considered, like, I don't know, an official character or something, so I couldn't bring it over. So anyways, long answer short, I only play it on normal. But I do want to try it. I want to try. You guys got me wanting to try that. You got me wanting to try the Necromancer, so I'm stoked. I'm ready to go.
And it was actually you, Church, that suggested to keep playing on Nightmare and Hell mode, because it's not a replay of, I mean, story-wise, it's a replay, but there's so much nuance that changes in terms of the skill progression and just the character progression, that you still feel like you're battling your way through the game.
Yeah, and like I kind of feel like normal is like this is your like your practice mode. Like they're familiarizing you with the game, kind of figuring out how it works and everything. And every time you jump up the next difficulty, it like it's more challenging, but it's all the nuance. It's like the monster ads, with the champion packs and the requirement for resistances. Like I don't want to like I don't want to gatekeep Diablo 2 and say you have to play the higher difficulties. But for me, we had mentioned, and like I wasn't like I wasn't judging. I was trying not to come off as judging, but like I think it's when you posted your beat tweet and you're like, oh yeah, I beat it on normal, and I was like, I can't consider Diablo 2 beaten unless you beat it on hell, because it's kind of like that argument. I know there's some people in the club that are like, club / kind of like the poly kill sort of folks that are like, oh, when I see credits, the game's beat. Mm-hmm. And I think that's to the detriment sometimes. And Diablo definitely, because like especially with your higher ability skills, like you just started getting those when you beat normal. All the like really cool gear and really cool stuff that all these things can do, like you don't even get access to until you get into Nightmare and Hell. Like the high level rune words, like they can do some really neat things, and all that is cut off unless you progress. And that's kind of the thing with the Diablo games, is you're not going to get the full experience if you just end it there, because they really push you to face that challenge and overcome. And that's where that the kind of like that reward, like you really feel like you accomplish things as you progress, like especially in hell mode, which it can definitely be challenging if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have anybody who can kind of share some of this information, or if you don't take the initiative to look up some things that you need to do to survive in hell difficulty. It can definitely make it challenging, and I could see how that could turn some people off. But I am wholly encouraging everybody to push through and try those higher difficulties, because it can be a blast. It can be pure chaos, especially when you get 8 people in these games and like literally all hell's breaking loose, and it can be so fun. So fun.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So from Diablo 1, which was originally peer-to-peer, they changed in Diablo 2 to client server, which eliminated a lot of the hacking and made multiplayer a little more fun for certain people. How does the difficulty work with that? Does it still progress like normal Nightmare Hell? And is it even harder because you have 8 characters all just pounding on Baal or on Diablo?
Well, the scaling is fantastic because if you play the game, it's just straightforward. It's like you get 100% loot drop, 100% experience, and a person joins and it bumps that up. It bumps up like how much will drop, but then it also bumps up how difficult the enemies will be, how much experience you get. So it's the scale. The scaling is done like very, very well, and I'm sure that's been tweaked over the years, because that's another awesome thing about Diablo 2 is Legacy Diablo was supported. They continued to update that game. They didn't add more content necessarily. They did add some things years later, back in the day, but patching, balancing, like they've continued to do that over the years, which is pretty great. But yeah, it scales very well. And for me, especially when it comes to online games or co-op games, even if I'm playing with complete strangers, like I have so much more fun just knowing that there's other people there participating and enjoying the experience and working together, to overcome these challenges together. It's fun. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I think once they have the server stuff ironed out, and we're not 562nd person in line, then I think we'll have fun with that. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on the gameplay, or can we move on to some of the graphical design stuff?
I think we covered it pretty well, largely.
Because I think graphics are a really sort of integral part to Diablo 2, because, Blizzard North had a choice. They could go to polygonal 3D graphics. They had the technology to do that, and they chose not to. They chose to stick with 2D because they felt they could get more action, more expression with the sprites that they had, than if they were trying to work with clunky polygons. And obviously Resurrected changed that. I played Diablo 3 just the first couple hours, and it was a fun game, but it did not feel like Diablo to me at all. And I know that's sort of up for debate, but I don't know if it was because of the polygonal 3D, or it felt like a good ARPG, but it did not feel like Diablo 2. Having said that, trying to hop back into legacy mode with the sprite graphics, I couldn't do that for very long either. So, how did you guys, maybe Kevin, start with you, how did you guys prefer to play this? Did you like the 2D back then? How does it hold up today? And do you like what Resurrected did with the graphical overhaul?
I did like the new graphics. I would switch to the old graphics just once in a while, just press the G key and look at it for a little bit just to see like, oh yeah, I remember how this looked and all that stuff, and then go right back to because I thought the new graphics were great. The one thing that, especially with the sorceress, the one complaint I've always had about the graphics on the original game was the walking gait of the characters. Like, they always looked like really stiff. Like she looked like as if that skirt was like way too tight for her and she couldn't move in it, and they fixed all that with the new graphics. I think they, pretty much seemed faithful to the original. All the characters kind of had like a similar look in that. Like I talked about atmosphere a little bit, that I got all the same vibes in that. One thing they really do really well with the graphics is I think the shading and shadows. Like when you're walking through any sort of tight corridor in that, and your character has like a light radius and you walk by things and the shadow moves very well. That's always like really well done in these Diablo games, and I think they brought all that vibe into the new Resurrected game. I did, for some reason, I guess because I was looking at Diablo videos on YouTube. There was one video that was recommended to me, and it was some what do they call them? Not simp, but I don't. What are the people, the angry guys who get angry at women online? What's that called? I can't remember the name.
Like simps or incels.
Incel, that's it. Yeah, I accidentally clicked on an incel video, and this guy was livid, that some titties were covered up. I don't know if I could say titties on this show, but I just did. And I'm like, dude, like, out of all the things you could be complaining about, that's what got you going. And I'm talking about like not the characters themselves, but like just images on the walls and stuff. I'm like, dude, you're worried, you're upset that they covered the nipples on a statue from a 20-year-old game. Like, whatever, dude. But I think they other than the titties that they covered up, I don't notice anything that changed. And if it wasn't pointed out to me, I don't think I would have noticed that. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, everything is the same under the covers. They did a really good job sort of keeping, in the original game, even with the sprites and you only had 16 sort of directions to face, I think you could still move 64 angles from your character just with a bit of foot slide. And they were able to sort of overlay the new graphics on top of that to make it a little smoother so you weren't running funny like you had mentioned, Kevin.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, this is... I definitely prefer the 3D, but it still feels like really, really good. It feels older, but it feels really good. And the lighting is awesome. And I saw that garlic. I mean, it was like a white pixel in the original game.
Yeah. Well, even the items dropped on the ground too. I could actually make out what a light potion is and a greater potion is. Like just the detail on that. I don't think you could. I could never see that on the original game. So
yeah, they had something called the flip team, who was essentially just working on the item flips. Different items sound different. They go to different heights when they flip, and they all have these graphics that are a little bit different than the original. So
I love like when you broke like a tiny little jar and a big ass giant shield would come flipping out of it.
Yeah,
yeah. And actually, one of the minor changes that they made with Resurrected is the dropped items reflect the visual look instead of just being the same thing, even though like the picture of it when you mouse over it like would be a different color. They changed that so the colors were reflective and they look like the items when you actually wear them now, which I think is pretty awesome. But one thing that I thought was really cool is when I fired up Resurrected, because I pretty much media blacked out, they're gonna do a remake. Okay, I'm on board. I don't need to see anything. I like to really experience everything firsthand. I don't need to see a video showing me every single thing before I will invest in the game. That's just how I go. And when I fired up Resurrected, it was like this is how I remember the game looking, which was interesting because then you hit G and you flip back to the old graphics.
Yeah,
it's like wow, like night and day. I mean, I love the old graphics. Like sprite based anything is like I just can't get enough of it. But I can't go back now, largely because of the frame rate of the original only ran at like 24 FPS.
Yeah,
which it's like I don't remember the game like running like that, but that's how it ran, and it was amazing back then. But yeah, they nailed it. They did such a good job. Like Vicarious Visions, because they also did the Tony Hawk 1 and 2 remake, and those are just again like flawless for what they were trying to accomplish. Like well done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think one fun fact that I learned when I was reading Stay a While and Listen, which is a fantastic book, David L. Craddock, 2 parts, and it really dives into the development of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. And in the Arcane Sanctuary, which is, you sort of take that portal and you're in sort of a space setting and floating platforms and stuff. They were going to have like big portal backgrounds and swirling stuff. And they just put a placeholder in there. They took the Defender arcade background with the stars, and they just plopped it in there as a placeholder, and they forgot to pull it out. So Diablo 2 actually ships with the Defender background in the Arcane Sanctuary, and they sort of played on that in the remaster as well. They kept just stars instead of the swirling portals. So I think like little tidbits like that are pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had a great design team, and obviously the team changed pretty dramatically. Blizzard in general, Blizzard North sort of fell apart, and for Diablo 3, it was an entirely different team. So you can see a lot of the the changes in art design. But I still feel that the atmosphere, like you were saying, Kevin, is really captured well. Even in the resurrected version with modern technology, you still get sort of that creepy, dimly lit vibe, as opposed to the brighter stuff that we saw in Diablo 3.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the lighting, like, it does so much to like enhance the atmosphere. To switch back to those old graphics, as your character would walk around, it's basically you have a circle of light around you, and then it's like black.
Yeah.
So this, like, you walk around a pillar, the light reflects or cuts around the pillar and everything. It's great. I do want to mention this, Kevin. I'm glad you brought up the kind of like quote unquote like censorship changes that they made. I'm mixed on that. Like, I don't necessarily understand why they made those changes. I can understand some of it, kind of with today's sensibilities, but it wasn't, the things that they had changed weren't necessarily like things to like titillate or excite people. It was like, oh, here's just a statue, and it was those kind of things. Like, I'm mixed on it. Like, one of the first things, it's like, what? Oh, about the Amazon. She's like an older lady now. It's like, yeah, I like I like attractive characters in video games. I like the Sork under boob. Like,
oh, that's right. Yeah, they did.
Whatever. It's changed. I wasn't upset at first. I was like, that's kind of strange, but I don't get hung up on those sorts of things because
at the end of the day,
that's
like,
not what it's about.
These are games are designed to sell and make money, right? And they want to make the games as accessible as they possibly can. And one of the ways that they figured out to make it more accessible to more people is to cover that stuff up. Not make it like as if it's just for a certain group. Make it for it's everybody. And you might not like it, but that's what it is. They have it figured out that if they cover the stuff up, it's going to sell more copies. And if they had it figured out that if they show more nudity, that's going to sell more copies, then they would do that. It's got nothing to do with like, oh, we're kowtowing to this group, or they just want to make money.
Yeah, there's people decrying like, oh, it's woke culture. It's like, no,
yeah, exactly.
That's not what's going on.
Video games have changed in the past 20 years, and there's it's a bigger audience now. It used to be a small audience. You had to spend thousands of dollars on a computer to play these games. There was only a certain amount of people that were going to do that. Right now, it's accessible. It's that this game is on. It blows my mind. Actually, it's on everything. It's on the Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, and the PC. Before it used to be just a PC exclusive game, and now it's on everything. So to make it accessible for everybody, and probably they had to change stuff to get it on the other platforms too. Like Nintendo's, notoriously censored. So maybe they just wanted it just made it easy, and then we could sell a bunch of copies, and it gets like a this rating instead of that rating, and they got it figured out that it's going to sell a lot more copies if they do it that way.
Yeah,
it's just the way it is.
That's a good point. I never really thought about the different platforms. If it had anything to do with them or whatever.
Maybe like it probably didn't, but they probably just thought safer bet if we go this route.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of platforms, I did want to jump back a little bit because I played it on the Switch.
You poor bastard.
Which is not mouse and keyboard. Again, clicking through with the Barbarian is easy enough, but with the Necromancer, I think, and I don't know how it works on the PC, but I was struggling pretty hard because when you're resurrecting enemies as skeletons, or you're doing corpse explosion, or you're resurrecting monsters as themselves, there's no real way to select which corpse or which anything you want to do that to. It just takes the nearest corpse. So if I'm surrounded by a bunch of weakling enemies, and I'm trying to resurrect a big monster that I've just downed over in the corner, I got to run over there. There's no like cursor. There's no.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem, because one of my friends played as a necromancer, and he was, especially once you get into hell, like, he was very specific about which corpses he would take over, because I mean that matters. So I've heard a lot of really great things about how they made the controller work, but sometimes it's that mouse, and you just
I
able to
think
click anywhere on the screen within fractions of a second with a mouse is
totally.
huge.
And again, in hell is really where it's hurting me, and just sort of running around, basic controls is great, and even the skills are great, but if I'm slowly like plowing through enemies and I'm standing in a pile of corpses and my army is 20 feet ahead of me and I'm trying to corpse explode those corpses are just exploding around me. Like, I'm not able to click where I want them to explode, so I'm just like having my own fun in the corner over here. Meanwhile, my army's getting destroyed. So I think it's a fundamentally broken piece, and I don't think there's any way around that unless you introduce like hold down a shoulder button and then you have a cursor and you can click. But even teleport, like, how does that work? Teleport just throws me some random place on a map. I can't click where I want to go.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I don't know. I did try, like, just because I've heard so much about how well the controller has been implemented in the game. I did try, because on the PC you can plug in a controller and play it that way if you want. And I lasted like maybe a minute or two just trying it out, and I'm like, it just felt very cumbersome. Like what you can do in 2 seconds. Now that just might be it might just be me because I'm used to the keyboard and mouse, but it just felt very counterintuitive. Like it felt like I guess if you wanted to sit back on a couch and play it on a TV, that would be a way to do it. But I don't know. I would grab a piece of cardboard and put my keyboard and mouse on my couch, on my lap, and play it like that.
The joys of wireless peripherals.
Yeah.
People are like, I can't use a mouse and keyboard. You absolutely
Sure
can use a mouse and keyboard.
You good strong piece of cardboard, put it on your lap. You're good to go.
So let's talk a little bit about music, because I know we dove a little bit into atmosphere and some of the lighting, and I think music is a huge part of just Diablo in general. Diablo 2 was Matt Ullman, the same composer that did the first game, and for the Lord of Destruction expansion pack, he actually went to what is the Slovak radio orchestra, symphony orchestra, whatever, in Europe, and he recorded all that stuff live rather than using tracks. So I mean, I think that's a huge part of the atmosphere. I think they built on that and executed it amazingly in Resurrected. But are there any tracks that stand out to you guys, or what did you guys think of the music as a whole?
Oh, it's always great. Diablo's more more of the music's more for atmosphere, less like something to keep you like entertained while you're playing. So it tends to be, unless you really focus on the music, it tends to be more background. But I mean, the main like menu theme when you're just in the menus, kind of like that generic, like the Diablo 2 theme is like, I've heard it for so many hours, like, and the fact that I don't hate it like says a lot about it, because you hear that music so much. And then of course the like rogue encampment theme, Tristram theme, it's all good stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah. This is usually the part of the podcast where Dean gets upset with me, because I'm notorious for turning down the music, because I just don't want to hear it. I just want to hear the sound effects. I'm a bang, crash, boom kind of guy. But with the Diablo game, with Diablo 2, I only turned it down like maybe 50%. Maybe kept it at like between 50 and 60, because I needed a little bit less. I find it a little too distracting when I'm playing a game. Like, I need to hear when that like when you're kicking the jugs and stuff, and it makes that little crank sound, so you know that there's like a trap in there. I need to hear that, and I find the music gets in the way sometimes of that stuff. But I only turned it down a little bit, and I like you guys say, it adds a lot to the atmosphere, so that's why I leave it on a little bit.
Yeah, and the locations of Diablo 2 are so diverse compared to the first one. Like, I can probably think of all the tracks of Diablo 1 in my head, and they're all pretty memorable, but there's not many of them. Whereas this, you go to like Luke Lane, which is sort of like a desert place. You go to Kurast, which is like the jungle place, and the music reflects that. And it's really cool in terms of atmosphere. if you guys ever get a chance, and maybe you do this all the time, but just put on the soundtrack. Just like dim the lights in the room and don't do anything. Just listen to that soundtrack, and it's so crazy how much nuance is in sort of the atmosphere in terms of tones and things. It's awesome.
Cool. We're gonna talk. Can we just mention sound effects for a second?
Yeah.
Because my one favorite sound effect in this game had me thinking of you, Dean, every time I heard it. Because every time you pick up a ring and you put it in your inventory, it gives a very nice loud ding, but it actually sounds like Dean. And then when every time you pick up a jewel or a ruby or something like that, you put that, it's a little lower, Dean.
Yeah.
So every time I heard that, I thought of you, Dean. It's just like it's saying your name every time. It's singing it for you.
So a lot of the sound effects were redone for remastered, but they purposely kept in the same gem dings and that skull pop.
Now
like if you put a skull in your inventory.
Yeah. If they changed those, I would be like incel guy on YouTube, like complaining. That's sacred. You can't change that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
potion sounds.
Yeah. Well, like, the other thing too is like Sarah will hear that, she'll hear it and she'll be like, oh, that, yeah, I remember all those sound effects. I'm like, yeah. She doesn't really want to play the game again now for some reason. She's just not in. But at some point, I know those sound effects are going to grab her and she's going to want to play it again.
I mean, it adds so much, especially when you're just, again, plowing through the same dungeon for the 20th time and you're just waiting to hear those dings or the rune drops or, something you're looking for. And again, that flip team, they did a lot in terms of making the axes sound different than the shields, sound different than the maces. And I mean, if you got a keen ear, you can play through blind almost, right? You know what's dropping. You don't have to hold down the shift key to see all the items. I mean, that's really all I had in terms of gameplay and music and graphics. I mean, I think the game is stunning. I think it's a great experience, whether you're a newcomer or you're coming back to it after 20 years. You guys just want to give your overall thoughts on the game? Kevin, why don't we start with you? Like, how would you recommend playing this? Would you recommend playing it? And, what are general thoughts?
Well, I love it. I think it's great. It's really hard for me to criticize. Like I said, I'm torn about the stuff that they didn't change. I'm glad that they didn't change a lot of stuff, but I'm also like, it's going to be a little difficult for new players to come onto it. I think the state that the game is in right now, it's we'll say it's October 2021. I'll say like the state it's in right now, don't buy it now, because there's a lot of stuff, the online stuff, and that just doesn't work yet. Even offline, I had the game crash on me a few times. And right away, this message box pops up, and it's from Blizzard, and they're like, "Hey, we want to fix this game. Tell me what you were doing to make the game crash." And I'm just like, I was playing the game. I wasn't doing anything crazy. I was in a dungeon. I was walking around, and it just crashed. So I think, like, I waited to play Diablo 3. I like it was like a year or two. The what was that thing that everyone was complaining about? The auction house, that was gone by the time I started playing it, and I had a blast. Never crashed on me once. Played it all the way through. Played it co-op. No problem, zero problem. So I would say, wait, get it like a year from now or whatever, when they work out all the bugs and you're able to do everything in the game and the servers aren't overtaxed. Even though it's Activision, they have tons of dough. There shouldn't be overtaxed servers, but for some reason there is. So I'd say wait, get it on sale, play it a year from now. But it is a fantastic game. It's not like if you like Church was saying, like if you played Diablo 3 before, maybe if you played the Torchlight games or that, there are going to be stuff that you're going to miss. But if you put yourself in the mindset that this was a trendsetter, this is basically a game that came out in 2000. Bush wasn't even president yet when this game came out. Like Bush 1 or Bush 2 or whatever, one of those Bushes. Like, it's a long time ago. So Clinton was still president, I guess, when this game came out. So that's a very long time ago. So if you put yourself in that mindset, I think you're going to have a good time.
Awesome.
I agree. Church, despite the lack of underboob,
yeah,
still pretty good game.
Yeah, no, it's still great. I like I said, this is arguably one of my favorite games ever made. I think it's still at it's one of the best. I would like somebody to show me an ARPG that's been made in the last 20 years that isn't following in the footsteps of Diablo 2. Like it's peak. It's peak. It's so good. It's so good. I mean, as far as like whether or not I would recommend people playing it right now, I'm different. I'm one that I don't necessarily. I'm in a weird place because I know a lot of people get really upset when you buy a game $60 and it has issues, crashing, server issues, whatnot. Maybe it's because I'm from such a strong PC background that it's kind of become the norm for me to deal with a lot of this stuff. The first week or so, when Resurrected was released, there were lots of server issues. It's a lot better now. The queue, the queue to get on is one of the things that they try to do to help with some of these server issues. But I'd imagine that queue thing is going to go away once they figure out. I don't know why they don't just open up, put another server on the rack or something.
Yep.
It's weird. Like Blizzard's one thing, now it's Act Blizzard. So Blizzard we knew and love is long dead. But even still, like Blizzard, Act Blizzard, they fail to understand how many people want to play their games. Like they underestimate it. And then they're like, well, we didn't think this many people would want to play one of the the most renowned games ever made. And it's like, whatever. Yeah, so if you do play and you haven't played it, you might get booted off a server once in a while. It's not the end of the world. I played a lot in those first 3 weeks that it was released. There was one weekend where I think just in the weekend I put like 30 hours, like on a Saturday and Sunday. It was ridiculous. I played a lot. I probably put like 80, 90 hours in Diablo 2. And honestly, I didn't feel like I had that many issues. Other than those first few days, there's a few hours where I could not log in because it said my character was already logged in. They have since fixed that issue as far as I know. But as far as platform, I'm always going to be I'm very much a PC guy. Say, if you like playing games on PC, go with the PC. But it's on all platforms, so play it on your preferred platform of choice. My only concern with that is I don't know what the community will be like, 1 year, 2 years down the road. I tend to find with more console games, as time goes on, those communities really dwindle, where PC communities can go, there's still Diablo 2 up until Resurrected, like there's still thousands of people playing Diablo 2, like actively, not having to like do weird things to get these servers online because the game was still supported. So that's always one thing that I worry about when it comes to some of the fractured communities. The fact that they don't have crossplay like drives me absolutely insane.
Yeah.
2021, there's no reason why people can't play these games together. But it is what it is. So, play on your platform of choice, how you prefer to play the game, just so you can enjoy the game without, barriers that would make you potentially dislike it for reasons that you don't need to. So absolutely, Diablo 2, 10 out of 10.
Yep, I would agree. But again, to echo these guys, I mean, there are crashes in single player as well, pretty often for my playthroughs. Certainly with multiplayer, this game has stood the test of time for 20 years. It could stand another couple months of you waiting on it. There's still going to be a community around when you do decide to pick it up. There are a couple hiccups with console-based play. If you're looking at some of the nuances or going through hell mode, I would definitely suggest PC. But this is an awesome game. Based on my playthroughs of Diablo 1, Diablo 2, and what I've played of Diablo 3, Diablo 2 is certainly sort of the definitive one. If you're going to look at a great RPG, I would suggest starting there and see what you think. But it's great for newcomers, and it's a great community online. And in the Cartridge Club, I was super surprised at when we announced this as a game of the month, how many people played along and how many people were just crazy veterans when it comes to games like this. So that was really cool.
I just want to add one thing too. If you played any other ARPG, if you played Path of Exile, Torchlight, whatever, and you think, I played Diablo because they're all driving. You haven't played Diablo. There's like playing through Path of Exile is not like playing through Diablo 2.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was worth adding or not, but I thought I should.
No, point taken. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Cartridge Club Game of the Month podcast. Again, November's Game of the Month is Spyro the Dragon. You guys can play that on the original PS1. You can grab the Spyro Reignited trilogy on modern consoles or PC. We got a member of the community who's playing it on PC. He's got it up to 120 frames a second. I mean,
wow.
It's a nice, smooth looking game.
I'll tell you what, Richard put it on his Steam wish list yesterday.
Wow, that's a testament right there, guys.
Yep.
And in December, for our 100th Game of the Month, we're finally playing a game that's near and dear to my heart, something that members have been requesting since I've been requesting since back in season 1. Final Fantasy VII, which is super, super exciting. It's my favorite game of all time. And I'm really hoping that we get a lot of newcomers that somehow have avoided this game for the past 24 years or however long it's been out.
Is the remake of Final Fantasy, is it all good to go like that? Or do we have to play just the original?
No, you can play the remake, which is really just part one of the original, or you can play the whole original. You can play this however you want. I think a lot of people are going to be playing the original game, the original 3-disc version. But if you want to just play through remake, you can do that as well.
The original game? Wait, the remake is just part of the original game? It's not the whole thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like the first 6 hours of the original game, but spread across 80 hours or however long, 30 hours, 40 hours.
I'm out of
how deep you go.
I'm going back into the Diablo dungeons.
Do both, so you get the true definitive experience.
Yeah, if you haven't played the original yet, I would definitely suggest popping in the original, playing through that, and then
I have.
You'll appreciate the remake so much more. But one other thing I wanted to mention to all the listeners is, leading into the 100th episode, we have a really special tribute video coming out later this month or later in November. And it's really just a look back at the Cartridge Club and the amazing community that's grown from it. I'm super proud of how that came together, so can't wait to reveal it to you guys. Keep an eye out in November. And if you see it, share it. Just want to grow the community. And I think this is a really great and heartfelt video that I think will help do that. But again, if you guys want to get involved with the club, if you guys are new listeners, I'd encourage you to follow us on Twitter at Cartridge Club NA. You can also visit our Discord for all kinds of discussion, past, present, future games of the month. But not only that, we talk about movies and comic books and content creation, just anything nerdy. You can go there. Great place for people to talk about anything. And if you guys are interested in supporting the club beyond just the review on the podcast app of your choice, the club is entirely funded by pledges made from members of the community like you guys. We're super grateful to those Patreon supporters. So if you're interested in being part of that, please look at how you can do that. Head over to patreon.com/Cartridge Club. I want to thank you guys, Kevin, Church, for being on this show. This was a super fun one, a super nice one to knock off my backlog. Kevin, where can people find you?
I guess the best place is on Twitter, Buried on Mars with a Z at the end, because some jerk still has Buried on Mars. Sent out one tweet in 2011, and I can't get it. I can't get that name. At one point, Twitter said they were going to drop all the people who did that, but this hasn't happened yet. So it's Buried on Mars with a Z, and that's where I post all my things. So if you're that interested, just follow me there, and that's where my stuff will be.
Yeah, I do like the Z better than the underscores. So let's.
Yeah, the underscores were getting a little too much.
Right. Church, how about you? Where can people find you?
So I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as The Game Grinder. Unfortunately, similar situation. Somebody took The Game Grinder on Twitter, so there's an underscore in mine. But just look me up, The Game Grinder, you'll find me. I also co-host the Game Tenants podcast. And of course, for this club folks, you might hear me periodically as one of the occasional hosts of the Cartridge Club. So
awesome. And again, I'm Dean Lasagna from Round 2 Gaming. Follow me on Twitter at round_2_gaming. Same story. And big thank you to all of you guys who've listened. We look forward to hearing from all of you soon. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, CC Unite.